All right, so you've been learning lots of stuff, right? We've got the quadratic equation, and that's this thing right here, the quadratic equation. You've got y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. When you graph that, you get a parabola, right? It's either going to be like this one, where it's open up, or maybe it's going to be like this one, where it's open down, okay? And now we have to start looking forward at what else is going on here. And so one of the things we really, really care about in math is x-intercepts. Okay, this is a big deal. X-intercepts. Where does the parabola cross the x-axis? So we've got two spots on this one, there and there. And we've got two spots on this one, there and there. And so we are trying to figure out where does that happen. So one thing we have to figure out completely is that these spots right here, if I wanted to label them, right, with my x and y values, I have no idea what the x values are. I mean, I could tell you if they're positive or negative. I couldn't tell you any more than that. But the thing I can tell you is what the y value is, right? So this spot right here and this spot right here, the y value for all of them is 0, right? The y value is going to be 0. So that's a big deal here, y equals 0. Now look at our problem up here, our equation. The y is right here. Do you see it? I don't know, maybe a couple more arrows, right? So here's the y value, and that is when you have all the ax squared plus bx plus c on one side, on the other side is going to be the y value. So if I want to find the x-intercepts, I need this y value to be 0. Okay? And so what we do is start with that. So let's say I want to find the x-intercepts of x squared plus 5 equals 21. Well, if I move the 21 over, right, so that I have a 0 on this side, then I have x squared minus 16. And look at that, I've got that y equals 0. And now I need to solve for x. And lucky for us, this is like before, when I told you, hey, let's solve this equation, there's no regular x in here, it's just an x squared. So I can go ahead and solve. So I add 16. X squared equals 16, square root both sides. So x equals plus or minus 4. Don't forget that plus or minus, because remember, this is a parabola. It's going to be open up. It's going to have an xy axis, right? And according to this right here is the 4, 0. And this right here is negative 4, 0, because I did that. All right, so we can do stuff like that. Here's where the problem comes in. What if our equation is x squared plus 9x plus 14 equals 0? So what if our equation, we've got the y equals 0 there, so that's good. But what if it has both the x squared and the x? You guys have agreed with me that I can't actually add those together, right? Because they've got different exponents, so I can't add them together. So now the question is, what can we do? And introducing something called the quadratic formula. Now here's how the quadratic formula works. Remember, we have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, but then we said, hey, y is going to be 0, and this only works if y is 0. Then what we have, the quadratic formula says x equals, because that's what we're finding the x values. And what we do is we do negative b, so that comes from that number right there, plus or minus. So remember how when we square root, we get a plus or minus? Well, our formula has a plus or minus in it, and it also has a square root. And then we take that b value and we square it, and then we're going to subtract 4ac. Hey, this should be kind of familiar. Do you recognize this? Remember we did this the other day in practice? And then we divide all of that by 2a, and a being that number right there. And earlier I talked about c, and that was that number right there. So this is our formula. Guess what you need to write in your notes? And you need to label that the quadratic formula. And you need to make sure to put this in there and make sure to emphasize that y equals 0. So since it's in your notes, I'm not going to write it anymore, but we are going to use it to help us find x-intercepts. Let's try one. So I had that one just a little bit ago, x squared plus 9x plus 14 equals 0. Now when you do your homework, I want you to write down the quadratic formula every time. But right now, I'm just going to go ahead and plug in. So I've got negative b. B is 9, so I'm going to put a 9 there. Plus or minus the square root of, it's going to be b squared, and again, b is 9, minus 4 times whatever a is. There's nothing in front of x squared, so remember we put a 1 there. Times whatever c is, that would be the 14, all over 2 times 1. Okay, now we continue on. Now I just have to simplify it. So we get negative 9 plus or minus the square root. Now I have to do all the math in here and get it down to one number. So 9 squared is 81 minus 4 times 1 times 14 is 56, divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, then we keep on going, because remember, until you get this down to one number, you can't square root. So I got negative 9 plus or minus, let's see, 81 minus 56. You guys made fun of me for not having a calculator, so I'm going to do this all by hand. So I get the square root of 25 divided by 2. Okay, now, hey, I can square root 25, so I get negative 9 plus or minus 5 all over 2. And then, if you remember, this plus or minus means I have two problems. So I'm going to write them both out. Negative 9 plus 5 divided by 2, and negative 9 minus 5 divided by 2. So we get negative 4 over 2 gives me negative 2. And this one is negative 14 divided by 2 gives me negative 7. So x equals negative 2 and negative 7. Or if we're really being technical, we got negative 2 comma 0 and negative 7 comma 0. And so that is finding the x-intercepts using the quadratic formula. And we'll get to practice this lots with our assignments.